I think we can get
Hello.
started. It's okay.
Shall we start? Yeah. Okay. Awesome. So let me start. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the session. So thank you so much, first of all, for joining the session on your evenings. This session, as we have already scheduled from long time back, it's about process mining, and the title is, as you can see, from pockets of automation end to end to process, right? So, what is process mining? What is the introduction to process mining? What this product is about, and how actually you can use this product. And today we have one of the really good experienced speaker who uses this product. So we have today Dave from Simplify Next, Singapore, and Dave has been in IT industry since long time, since last 15 years, and he has a really vast experience. And over last 6 years, he has used UiPath and specialized most of the UiPath products. I have personal experience working with Dave closely. He's a phenomenal experienced person, and I'm really excited to bring him here to the stage today to talk about process mining. And he will share his insights, his own experience. So since he's here, ask as many questions as possible, and he's all yours for next 1 hour. So over to you, Dave.
Thank you, Nisak. All right, so let's just jump straight into what are we going to cover in today's session. All right. So basically, in the next 1 hour, we will be talking about some of the common business process challenges that are faced across the various industries. We will look into how process mining can actually help us solve some of these challenges. And more importantly, we will also delve into some of the practical use cases in which process mining can be implemented. All right. And I will end off the session today with a quick demo on how process mining actually works, what can we actually expect from process mining, and to give us a feel on the overall user interface on process mining. All right. So let's take a moment to understand the key challenges that many businesses face with their business processes. All right. And these common issues can significantly impact productivity, increase costs, and reduce the overall effectiveness across the various industries. So the critical question really is, so how do we identify and quantify these inefficiencies? Now, traditionally, this would involve conducting workshops, interviews, and speaking to the process SME. We may even need to review the system records and really delve through all the details to really identify what are the process bottlenecks. So that's what we used to be doing. Now, if left unchecked, if we do not correct the inefficiencies, if we do not try to do something and optimize the process, these inefficiencies can easily escalate, leading to increased confusion among the users community and result in further operational challenges. All right. So the key to solving this problem lies in having a tool that can automatically discover these underlying concerns. So within the UiPath product family, there are several discovery products that can be tailored to meet specific needs. So we do not need to implement every one of them, but we can pick and choose which product would be able to meet our needs. So for instance, we can begin with process mining to analyze our system of records, SAP, Oracle, etc. Additionally, we can deploy task mining and communication mining to examine the manual processing workflows performed by selected individuals. And once we have the data from process mining, task mining, and comms mining, we can review all this data and attempt to identify what are some of the process bottlenecks. And when these are identified, we can easily submit all these process optimization opportunities into the automation hub. And the automation hub is basically a location for us to document all these opportunities, automation opportunities specifically, and track them and prioritize them and schedule them for implementation. And once we have all these automations implemented, we can then go back into a feedback loop and use process mining to help us visualize the improvements. So let's dive deeper into process mining, what exactly it is, right? So as I mentioned, the traditional approach for process discovery is really, we really need to navigate in the dark. We need to review and speak to people and depend on guesswork, intuition, experience, etc., to identify where are all the process bottlenecks. Now, with process mining, it's like flipping a switch to illuminate our processes. So basically, with process mining, we will have a very clear and concise visual representation of the processes. And with process mining, we will be able to see what are some of the bottlenecks. So for example, we will be able to see from a process step to the next, how long does it take on average? And using those metrics, it will allow us to make a data-driven decision and make some data-driven insights to identify areas where we can potentially optimize the process. So basically, times have changed. We now have AI, so we should also change our approach to discovering and optimizing processes. So the power of UiPath Process Mining really lies in its ability to connect with our system of records. So the keyword is this: connect with our system of records. So earlier I kept on emphasizing data-driven. Now this is the reason why. So once we have connect UiPath Process Mining with our system of records, we are able to leverage on UiPath's AI-driven engine to review every single transaction that has occurred. All right. So basically, UiPath Process Mining leverages on various data points, such as the transaction timestamps, document references, approval sequence, etc. All right. Any key metadata that we can glean out of those transactions will allow us or allow process mining engine to help us depict the end-to-end process flow with all this information. So some of the out-of-box capabilities also allows us to quickly identify transactions that may have compliance issues. So for those that have work on procurement process, this term maverick buying is a very useful matrix to help us identify some of the compliance issues pertaining to procurement processes. All right. So in essence, UiPath Process Mining enables organization to gain unparalleled insights into our day-to-day processes. And through an intuitive and visual representation, right, as you can see on the left-hand side of the diagram over here, we are actually able to get meaningful information. We are able to view some metrics that transpired as we move along the process steps. So earlier on, I mentioned the average throughput. We are also able to see the volume of data or transactions that transpires between each and every process steps. All right. And basically the essence here is that being able to visualize the end-to-end process is not the only capability provided by UiPath Process Mining. All right. Now we can also use process mining and weave it into our continuous improvement initiative. So for example, through discovery, we may have identified a particular bottleneck, and the decision may have been to, okay, let's automate this part of the process to make it smoother. And once the automation is launched, we can then feed the data back into process mining. And using the process mining end-to-end process view, we would be able to see the improvements. We would be able to see for ourselves whether the bottlenecks have been removed. All right. So that is actually the true power of UiPath Process Mining. So I will illustrate this concept in the upcoming demo session. So focusing on the process mining lifecycle, I mentioned the keyword where, as part of the process improvement cycle, we can also use process mining. So in summary, basically through process mining, we are able to iteratively discover, understand the issue, act on the issue, and more importantly, use process mining to monitor the improvements. And using this framework, it essentially takes out or eliminates the guesswork from the equation, and to help organizations optimize their processes in a more structured and efficient manner. Okay. And we all know that process automation is crucial for improving efficiency and productivity within the organization. And with continuous discovery, we can now quantify the ROI and visualize the positive impact made on those business processes through automation. So for example, some of the organizations that I have personally interacted with or have implemented automations for them, many a time they are saying, okay, why should I go into this automation? What is the ROI? What are the tangible and intangible benefits? And of course, we can try to calculate the ROI upfront using the FTE savings model or listing down all the non-tangible benefits, but that is not the full picture. Now imagine we have process mining. Once we have automated those areas, we can actually use process mining to help us drive home the results. So we are actually able to measure whether the KPIs defined, whether the strategy defined, whether the goals defined are eventually improved or met through automation. And that is the true power of process mining. And over time, this will lead to a positive feedback loop that drives even more automation within the organization. And you can already imagine with the positive feedback loop, things will just get more and more efficient over time. Users will just get more and more happy. And more importantly, all of these improvements are measured because they are data-driven. And we are not alone. All right, we are not alone. So multiple research and advisory companies, they share the same vision as UiPath. And they believe that having an automated platform that is actually able to provide process discovery functionalities, able to help us glean insights into inefficiencies, would be the key for organizations to meet their organization goals. So if the organization's goal is for cost reduction, then perhaps if they were to use some automated process discovery tool, that would actually help them achieve their goals. And the prediction is more than 10% of business operations would eventually onboard to process mining. All right. So we have covered essentially what is process mining. So the next part of the discussion is really about how can process mining be used in the industry, and typically where do we apply them? So out of the box, process mining actually provides quite a fair bit of what we call application templates. So these are quick starter guides that allows us to connect to our system of records, pull the data in, and leverage on the functionalities on day one. Now, if we so choose to develop our own matrices, our own dashboards, that is also possible. All right. So some examples would be for finance. We have some out-of-the-box processes that allows us to do some accounts payable and provide some insights with regards to accounts payable. All right. Likewise, for procurement, we have the P2P process, which incidentally would be the process that I would be used for my demonstration later. All right. And we have a lot of other processes and more to come, and more to come. All right. In future upgrades with regards to process mining, to make it even easier for us to actually implement process mining in our organizations and adapt them to review our internal business process with the ultimate objective of optimizing the process and improving efficiency and productivity. Most importantly, to meet our strategic goals. All right. And these are some of the systems of records that we are actually able, or rather I would say plug and play, that we can actually start using process mining with. So these are pre-built connectors, and through some configurations, we are actually able to integrate process mining with SAP, for example. And what that means for us is that instead of having to export the data from the system and import them into process mining, through these connectors, we would be able to allow the data to flow into process mining. And then once we synchronize the data, we will be actually able to run the dashboards on top of the data. So some of us may question what happens if my system of record, is not available on this slide. It's okay. So apart from these pre-built connectors, process mining also offers other more standard means of integration to allow us to connect to our system of records. Like for example, we are actually able to define a C data connector, and through the C data layer, we are actually able to sort of like an ETL, transport the information from our system of records into process mining. And using C data functionalities, we can also schedule the data to be refreshed on a periodic basis. So this ensures that we will always have up-to-date information on the analysis. All right. So at this point, I'm just going to pause for a while. Any questions on the previous slides? Okay, good.
So
Okay.
if anyone has any questions, you can just unmute, just can ask questions to Dave at this point. So once he starts his presentation on the actual project, you can ask your questions later also. If you want to park your questions in chat, we can park your questions in chat as well. Or later we can have a Q&A session around the end. Thank you so much. Yes, Dave, we can continue.
All right. So I'll just move on to the next segment,
Yeah.
which would be the demo. Okay, so let me pull up my screen. Okay, so on my screen, I'm actually viewing the UiPath Process Mining dashboard. And right on the screen, we are actually at the end-to-end process. So in the presentation earlier, I mentioned that once we load the data into the system, the engine behind process mining will be able to review every transaction and glean off the metadata to help us construct this process flow. So what I have on the screen are some data related to the P2P process. All right, procure to purchase. Sorry, purchase to pay. Sorry. All right, the P2P process. Now on the screen, you can see that the individual boxes are color coded. So in this case, we are actually trying to look at in terms of the volume of transactions. So if the color is darker, it means to say the transaction volume is higher. So through these visual cues, we are actually able to zoom in to which of these specific process steps are actually the bottleneck. All right. Now, just by viewing the transaction count may not be very useful. So we can click on this button. And for example, we can change it to the actual or the average throughput time. So over here, this will provide some more useful feature, right? Like for example, I can see that my restore purchase requisition level 1 took 7.86 days on average. And I mean, obviously this is my process, but if you understand the actual process, what that means is that actually a lot of purchase requisition records were deleted. And then after they were deleted, they were subsequently restored. And just by looking at these numbers, it tells me that actually there's a lot of delay whenever the purchase requisition record was edited, deleted, or updated. And if we toggle this back in terms of volume, we know for sure, all right, out of the 6,000 over purchase requisition records that were created, 455 were deleted, and ultimately 241 of these records actually were restored. And because the restoration process took so long, let me just toggle back, eventually it will cause the end-to-end process to take an average of 21 days. So just by the end-to-end process, I'm actually able to identify some of the bottlenecks with my process. All right. Now, moving over to this part of the screen, you can see on the screen we have variant 1s all the way to variant 100 plus. No, 500. All right. So what are these variants? This means to say when process mining reviewed every single transaction and attempt to map them out into these processes, it actually discovers 500 over process variants. All right. So this means to say, because the system of record doesn't really have any capabilities to guide users to follow the process. So therefore, some users are basically just performing those transactions that are not in accordance to the business process. So if we assume that variant 1 is the correct process, or for the matter process, variant 1, 2, and 3 are the correct processing steps, then the remaining variants are those where there are deviations. So I can actually zoom in to the specific variations and see for myself how that variation looks like. All right. So in this case, we can see approve, create, approve. Okay, nothing looks out of order. So this looks quite okay. So let me just remove the filter and let's just go to something more filter. So over here, we can see this. So what this arrow tells me is that for some records, after the purchase order item has been created, the approval process was actually skipped. All right. And just based on this diagram, this tells me that there are some non-compliance issue. And that is the significance of all these variances. So through process mining, when we complete the entire process map, we are not only able to glean insights in terms of the bottlenecks, we are also actually able to identify areas where there may be some process compliance issues. Specifically, there are some out-of-box dashboards that are available, and they are eventually targeted at helping us surface some of this compliance issue. Like for example, for the P2P process, we are actually able to zoom into which of the companies eventually have a late discovery date. And looking at this, we can see that 4,500 Best Run Canada actually have the most issues, where they contribute to 92.31%. All right. So these are some of the out-of-box dashboards available for us to review some of the matrices. Now, of course, if we do have some other matrix that we are tracking, it is possible to modify this dashboard and add those into the chart so that we can build something that is more customized for our organization. But that is not the complete picture. All right. One of the real value of process mining lies in this segment known as the root cause analysis. So let's just hypothetically assume that we are trying to understand, we know that late delivery is an issue. We are trying to understand what are the contributing factors resulting in late discovery. So what we can do is that over the filter, we can say that we want to take a look at late delivery and mark it as yes. So then the data will pull out. And over here, you can see this checkbox known as show significant influence. So again, right, at this point in time, this view is eventually like a statistical tool that help us model the root cause analysis. And some of the companies or plants in this context are, from a statistical perspective, not significant. So if we were to check on it, it will eventually be removed. Okay. Now, these numbers may look a bit confusing. So let me just try to explain how to read this chart. So over here, the objective you're trying to arrive at would be which are the influences that results in a late delivery. And specifically, we want to zoom into plants as opposed to companies. All right. So from a plant perspective, we can see that all these plants process in total close to 18,000 items, and of which 2,700 of them are late. And that works out to be 15%. So 15% of order items processed are late. So that would be the global benchmark. Now, if I zoom into this particular plant, 3000 New York, I can see that it contributes 6,000 of the order items, 6,000 into 18,000. And specifically within this 6,000, 1,000 of these records or these items were late. All right. And specifically for this plant, 27% of purchase order items processed by this plant, they are late. And if you look at this percentage, it's actually showing 13%. So what this tells me is that this particular plant contributes to 13% above the global benchmark. All right, where the global benchmark is 15%, this plant contributes 27.86. So if you minus out, it's about 13%. And for the remaining plants, while they may be showing negative percentage, but that doesn't mean that they are in the clear. Because if you were to zoom into the details, we can see that, for example, this 6,000 Mexico City, they are actually contributing to 8% in total, right? Of late purchase order items. So now that we know that this plant perhaps is the problematic plant, so how can we zoom into this particular plant and understand why all these orders are late? So what we can do is we can do a right click filter, and we can do a filter by selected value. Oh, sorry, I can't do it like that because it influences here. So what I can do is that I can go to end-to-end process and add in a plant filter. And in this case, I can select 3000 New York. So earlier, what we did was we actually applied a filter on variance for us to zoom in to the respective variances and understand for ourselves how the variances actually pans out. So in this case, what we are doing is that we want to understand all the transactions that happen within 3000 New York and specifically identify process bottlenecks. So just by looking at the colors, I know that I should focus more on these colorings. So for example, I can zoom in here and I can see that actually they have the same problem. A lot of purchase requisition records were actually holding up the entire process. And because the purchase requisition was held up, so therefore the average throughput was late, resulting in a late delivery. All right. And the same happens again during the approval of the entire purchase order, where a lot of the purchase orders were eventually rejected, reworked, or restored. All right. Now, these are just some of the conclusions that we can formulate based on our experience or understanding of the process. Now, if you look over here, there's this torchlight. If I were to click on it, now using some AI analysis in the background, process mining would also be able to help me identify some of these bottlenecks pertaining to the process on screen. So as you can see on the screen, the analysis made by the AI is quite close to the conclusion that I have made. So in essence, we know that the bottlenecks happen at the purchase requisition, the purchase order approval, so on and so forth. And through all these bottlenecks, I can then identify what, or rather, now that we know what is the problem, the next question is, how can we fix it? So if you were to continue scrolling down, you can see that there's this tag known as low automation. So what does this tell us? So in UiPath Process Mining, we are actually able to integrate with UiPath Orchestrator and allow the orchestrator admin to start tagging automation projects pertaining to specific processes. And once we have done that, it will then create an end-to-end process map that incorporates the view of which process steps are automated and which are not. And that's how I'm actually able to arrive at this conclusion that for this particular process step, it actually has low automation. Now, specifically, if I were to zoom into the automation potential dashboard, I can see specifically which are the processes that are currently having a low automation rate. So in comparison, create purchase requisition, the automation rate is actually 0. In comparison, the approved purchase order level 2, the automation rate is actually 87%. So somehow within the system, through workflows or through UiPath RPA automations, we know that this particular step, some aspects of it, it is automated. Now, process mining doesn't stop here. So over here, by providing some matrices in terms of the FTE and the manual processing time, we are actually able to toggle this button. Maybe let me just toggle another one, right? So once we toggle the simulate button, it is actually able to help us simulate or quantify what happens if we were to automate this particular process step, what kind of process rate we are looking at. So let's assume over here, yeah, it's never always completed the same way. Let's just say there are 5 to 8 variants, and let's just assume that this one is 100% digital data input because we are actually looking at create purchase order item, and most of the time we would already have data inputs, and the inputs are essentially structured. So if I go ahead and click on the, sorry, something went wrong. If I toggle the simulate button, essentially I can see that once automation goes in, potentially I can automate this particular purchase order item with a potential of up to 93%. All right. And this percentage is eventually calculated based on first analyzing the transactions to understand whether or not it is really out of the 5 to 8 process variance boundary that we have set. And B, discount those processes where we do not have structured inputs. So because earlier on we mentioned 80%. So based on some simple mathematics, we are actually able to simulate the value in which automation is able to bring to us. So let's assume that the create purchase order item is something that we would like to automate. So what we can do is that we can toggle on the context switch and straight away submit this to Automation Hub as an automation opportunity. So over here, I will be able to give it a name, provide some descriptions. So some of the description and matrices have already been pre-populated for me. I can just fill up this information and submit. And this particular opportunity will then be submitted through the Automation Hub. And within Automation Hub, my COE lead will be able to review all these opportunities. And if they concur with my assessment that this particular process step eventually have a high potential automation potential, then they can choose to prioritize and implement it. And once the automation is completed, we can then link it back to the create purchase order item, and in a feedback loop, provide us with real-time updates in terms of whether all these bottlenecks have been resolved. So when we click on this, with automation, we would expect some of these boxes to disappear. All right. Now, last but not the least, we also have some of the dashboards catered to P2P, specifically for compliance and conformance. So over here, this dashboard is to highlight in terms of conformance. So this is a bit duplicated with the variance, but the variance only tells us how many unique ways a particular process have been created. But over here, in terms of conformance, I would be able to quantify, in this case, this would be this particular item. Yeah, so over here, it says that out of this, the average throughput is 396 days. And one of the record actually have this. So if I were to apply a filter, I will be able to zoom into what this single process is all about. All right. So this is a long deviation. Basically, it's just describe this process flow, right? But just by zooming in, you can see all the red color highlights. So these red color highlights signify process deviation. So over here, you can see the dotted lines. I'm not sure whether it's very clear. So the dotted lines are supposed to be the sample processing steps, where in this case, after I have approved the purchase requisition level 1, is supposed to move into purchase requisition level 2 approval. So that is the supposedly correct way of the flow. But from here, I can see that instead of going straight down, this record is actually skipping the flow, coming down over here, and then involved in a list of spaghetti that goes all around to different processing steps. And in some of the processing steps, even created a loop. All right. And through here, I can eventually target this particular process and know that this is actually something that I need to deep dive into. So perhaps I would need to interview whoever that created this record and understand why this happened. So if I click on the process data with this global filter, I would actually be able to get the actual record. All right, the actual record. So in this case, we are talking about purchase order items. Sorry. So this one will be create purchase order item. So over here, I can see that, maybe let me just call out some other columns that may be useful. Like for example, okay, maybe let's not go to over here. PO items. Okay. So just by using this PO item ID, I'm actually able to zoom in. In this case, this was created by creator tree. And then I can have a word with creator tree to understand when this particular PO item was created, why did he choose to take this processing steps. And from there, we may be able to gain insights into, for example, some inadequacies in terms of our existing process. So perhaps he had to do it this way because of some changing business needs. Perhaps there were some system bugs that prevented him from progressing. And as a result, the record was actually posted to a different part of the workflow. There can be many reasons. Now for this, from a data perspective, yes, we know that it's an issue, but in this particular context, it may be easier if we have a word with creator tree to understand what are the underlying root causes. And from there, perhaps there will be some actions required to fix the system or fix the process. All right. So that is the value of conformance checking. Basically allows us to deep dive into the individual processes and specifically identify the impact quantified by the number of processes. Okay. Last but not the least, this is my personal favorite. Now, many a times when we want to measure a process, we would like to measure it also in terms of compliance. And compliance is something that everybody knows is important, but it is always very, very hard to get the data out from our systems. Now, some of us may be lucky. Our system of records may contain some of these reports that allows us to actually quickly pull out all this information. But in this case, if we are using process mining, Maverick buying is already available out of box. And some of the matrices that it actually is able to identify will be, for example, goods received before PO approval. So this is something very bad. So what this means is somehow before the PO is actually approved, somehow the goods have already arrived and we have already performed the goods receipt. So this is, yeah, as the name suggests, is really a non-compliance, right? Because ideally we should wait for the PO to be approved, submitted, and then submit the information over to the supplier, and then once the goods arrive, perform goods receipt. All right. Now, some of the other things will be, for example, unreasonably quick goods delivery. Now, in most organizations, this may be something that we will give it a miss because, I mean, we are talking about 18,000 over records. It's unlikely that we would actually go in and tabulate how long from the point where the PO item is created and approved till the point the goods receipt process was actually initiated. All right. So most of the time, we won't really collect that kind of matrix. But over here, under the Maverick buying, these are some of the common matrices that we use to track or measure P2P processes. And we have all of this available to us out of box through UiPath Process Mining. Yeah, I just realized that I still have this highlighted. So I need to clear all these filters for the numbers to make sense. So now this makes more sense. Okay. So with that, eventually I've covered the core functionalities and some of the useful features provided by UiPath Process Mining. Any questions from the floor?
There are no questions as of now, Dave. So if you have something to cover, we can cover that as well. In case if anyone has any questions, just put in chat so we can address your questions. Thank you.
Yeah, so actually, I'm ahead of time. I've already completed what I wanted to
Oh,
complete.
awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, then we can open up for questions. So in case if anyone has any questions, can ask now. So if it's regarding your own platform, or if you have already implemented process mining, or if you want to in future, you can ask questions based on that as well.
Yeah, hi
Anyone?
Dev.
Yes. Hi.
Yes. Yeah. So Dev, basically, right? So as of now, I have not implemented any kind of process mining solution. But right, if I wanted to start it, right, this which you have shown it basically, it's already built up from the source, and just now this all these diagrams have been brought up by the UiPath, right? And basis which you have given us some of the thoughts, right? How it will help us and the competition, all these things, right? But if someone has to do it from the start, right? How that one can do based on the
Mm,
source, right? Yeah.
mm. So specifically for that, right? So maybe let me just go deeper into how this can be set up. So let me just exit here. Now, from the development tab, if I were to create a new app, so this would be the place where I would select the P2P process. All right, so in this case, there are many different processes available to us. We have P2P, order to cash, incident management, account management, so on and so forth. And on the screen, you can see that SAP Ariba, SAP Oracle, etc. These are the platforms with existing connectors. So specifically, your question was asking what happens if my system of records, does not fall under here, right? So when I click on Create App, let's give it a name. Now, at this point in time, I will still be able to leverage on the existing dashboards and functionalities that we have seen earlier. The only thing missing in the puzzle is for us to upload the data. So in this case, we can choose to upload the data manually using a set of CSVs. So unfortunately, we need to comply to the formats of those CSV, which you can download from here. Or we can implement some automated means, like for example, using a C data extractor to create some sort of an ETL back into our system and to bring those data in. And once we have defined all these connectors and then we progress along the way, that's where the data will be imported, analyzed, and the end outcome is we will be able to get something similar to what I'm seeing on the screen right now. I hope that answers your
Okay.
question.
Yeah. Thank you. But again, the one more question. Okay. So now, if we see at the organization level, right? This process mining, though, even if right, it will help us, right, for during the automation platform for identifying the bottlenecks. But at the organization, right, I don't see right any kind of much more process or any kind of client is more interested in process mining things. So is there any kind of issues, or we can say is there we can say a specific region, right, only concentrating on this process mining, like the APAC region, right? They will be having the kind of legacy data, okay, and they might be only targeting for this process mining. But what about these others like US, Japan, Germany?
So sorry, I wasn't
Yeah,
actually
yeah,
able
yeah,
to
yeah,
catch your question.
yeah. So
Could you
yeah,
just repeat it? I'm sorry.
yes, I will repeat it. So. So I can say, right, current in my organization or previous organization as well, right? So there were no clients they were interested in the process mining. Or even if we propagated this much of right benefit from out of it, right? So is there any reason out of it? The second thing that I can see, right, only APAC region, right, where they are having kind of data from the old legacy system, right? And they wanted to recognize the data and do something on that data. But again, the third thing again that I can see, like so the US region, okay, again from the UK side as well, right? So there were no many clients, right? They are seeking to use this process mining. So is there any specific reason or out of it for this basically that I wanted to ask?
Yeah, so if I understood your questions, you're trying to give an example of why some regions are more receptive towards process mining and some regions are not. Is that where you're
Yeah,
coming from? And
yeah,
specifically, you gave examples where the APAC region are actually huge adopters, whereas the Europe and US are low adopters. Is that correct?
right, yeah,
Okay. I mean that's actually a very interesting observation. Because actually based on our statistics, the Europe and the US are actually the key adopters of process mining. A lot of the large organizations are actually using process mining. All right. But nevertheless, the way I look at this is essentially a change management kind of situation in which process mining are more suitable for organizations that are interested in improving and optimizing their processes. Organizations that recognize that there are existing inefficiencies and that there's actually room for improvement. And as opposed to doing a manual review, especially if these organizations have a proper system of records, now, as opposed to doing a manual review, they can choose to use process mining to automate the end-to-end discovery process. Now, on the flip side, if the organizations they do not have a structured way of doing things, or worse still, they do not have system of records, and from a leadership perspective, they do not have the pressure to improve on their existing ways of working, then for those organizations, unfortunately, UiPath process mining may not actually be suitable for them. All right. And the same applies for automation opportunities, right? RPA opportunities. Um, a lot of these organizations, basically, we need to work alongside them to help them identify areas where they can potentially do better. But if, let's say, they're not receptive to all these change initiatives, then we will probably have to try harder and convince the management that this is actually the way to go.
okay. Yeah.
Mm.
But right, in terms of the licensing cost, right, for the process mining, is there a huge cost involved for this buying the license of the process mining?
You got me there. Nisa, do you know?
So actually, costing wise, it comes as two different offers. One is it comes with a bundle. If you get a proper bundle which involves process mining as an included option, that would be a little cheaper option where you can get started with your project. Or otherwise, you can specifically dedicatedly get only process mining units where you can actually work on only process mining. So again, end of the day, it comes under the AI products. So it uses AI units, if I'm not wrong, Dave, right? It uses AI
Mm-hmm.
units. So you need to buy AI units bundle. And once you buy AI units bundle, you can basically just enable the process, ask UiPath to enable the process mining service. And the AI units will be consumed based on the AI units calculator for process mining specifically. So there are various ways in which it can consume your units based on your usage or based on your identification, right? Based on your setup. So there are many things which comes where it consumes. But cost wise, again, it depends on if you are a customer, if you are a service company who is buying for your customer, it depends on that, all of that.
Okay. So again, one more question. Okay.
Mhm.
So feel like, right, is this process one really benefiting really giving benefit to the client or not? Okay, why this question is on mind, I will tell you. Okay,
Mhm.
so even if, right, we are having the lots of, we can say, data, we can say legacy data. Okay, they are having this, all they are having at the back end, it's a data. They might have some kind of structure in it, right, where it is coming
Mhm.
from the different sources. Okay,
Mhm.
even if, right, they can apply a team of more, can say, 7 to 8 people on it to analyze it, right, and try to
Mhm.
get out something out of it. Okay, but
Mhm.
even if we apply the process mining there, okay, what exactly it is showing is that it will be only showing you the bottlenecks. Okay, it will be showing you some
Mhm.
kind of automation opportunities. Okay,
Mhm.
that only it is been showing. But after that, even if after showing that only, right, again we need to apply some of the developers team there and do the automation on it. Okay, So
Correct.
again, right, first of all, we need to basically take out the process mining licenses. And once we identify the bottlenecks of process, we can improvement things, right? Again, we need to have a team of developers. And
Correct.
if we combine all this, right, it's the quality will go at the higher side. Okay.
Correct.
So does it really helping it in terms of the cost wise or how it
I'll
is?
answer you from two different perspectives. So the first of all, process mining comes under discovery part, right? So the discovery products of UiPath or any company, it comes under discovery phase. So the
Mhm.
actual global market of process mining overall is not in billions, it's still in millions of dollars, right? So it's almost close to 700, 800 millions around 2022. And by 2028, it's supposed to be reaching $2 billion dollars at least. Why? Because majority of the Fortune 500 companies, right, they are using process mining to basically analyze, improvise their current business processes, and for them it's
Mhm.
actually beneficial, right? For them it actually makes sense for them because they have a huge amount of data sitting, and that data they need to generate actually tailored insights. Now when I say tailored insights, they don't want the actual statical insights like just give me the insight based on this current data. No, right, the data is huge, right, in terms of calculation. And currently, generative AI doesn't have capability to go through that huge amount of data. So you end of the day have to use such products. So if you have heard about Celonis or other products, these are like big products in industry which are already doing purely process mining since long time, right? And they are still like one of the big competitors in industry. So UiPath obviously has a strong process mining tool. And to be very honest, it is really needed. However, only in case when you have a huge amount of data to be tailored, you want the data to be actually properly processed, analyzed, and check what are the improvements that I can do in my business, what are the things that I can actually improvise. And there are big companies like Roche, Thermo Fisher, like majority of the companies which are not purely IT, but they have a huge amount of data in their organizations which they want to process. That's where the process mining actually charms a lot and comes into picture. And obviously it's part of discovery, so post process mining there are many things which helps a lot. So if it is really necessary, it depends on what is your target audience, what is your target customer. And on top of this, I think Dave can add more because Dave has also been involved into client communication. So Dave can give you more insights on when to actually use process mining.
Yeah, so just to continue from the train of thought, right? I have personally encountered some clients that are at a juncture, all right, crossroad, in which they are trying to decide um, which enterprise platform to move to. So perhaps they were previously on, I don't know, SAP, and they want to move on to Microsoft Dynamics, for example. All right. So this particular client wanted to quantify the value of this particular migration. So what they did was they actually created a snapshot on SAP to highlight all the process deviations, the bottlenecks, etc., etc. And based on these insights, they actually attempt to remediate some of these bottlenecks and process inefficiencies directly in their new platform, which in this case will be Microsoft Dynamics. And once that project is completed, they then do another snapshot on Microsoft Dynamics, and then they will compare the data side by side and use it to justify, or rather to measure, the success of this particular migration effort. So that was one use case. The other use case was for an organization that was a relatively young company, a startup, and essentially, as with most startups, the process or the business processes may not be so defined. So what that client actually did was, as opposed to starting up with a task force to document and map out all the processes relevant in the organization. So what they did was they actually just ingest the raw data of their system of records, use process mining, analyze the various variants, and then using the data from the variants, they then come out with the so-called to-be version of their processes. And through this, when we map this through all the respective processes in procurement, in finances, in IT, etc., you realize that they can quickly use this discovery tool to come out with a very nice picture and accurate picture of all the processes. And that actually helped them achieve their target, which is to document and standardize all the processes within the organization. So these are the two more unique cases in which I've seen clients use process mining. And last but not the least, Nisak mentioned many good points. I would like to highlight one key point, which was mentioned during the presentation, but wasn't really, mentioned again. And that is actually through the value of monitoring. So most of the time, when we conduct process optimization exercises, is usually a one-time exercise. So we can do the discovery, it could be automated, it could be manual, doesn't matter, right? Then we act on it, and then we will roll out those improvements. But many a time we forget the importance of continuous discovery, more importantly, continuous improvements. And using process mining, and specifically using it in the monitoring phase, it actually allows us a very simple and effective means to measure those improvements. So for example, we may say that this would be the KPI target for this month. Say, for example, I want to keep late delivery to within 5%. So that's my KPI. And this was where we started, 27%. Now, through some process improvements, optimizations, through some automations, now 3 months, 6 months down the road, when I come back to the dashboard, when I look at the late delivery again, I can see whether have I achieved the 5% target. And if the answer is negative, maybe I still fell short, maybe it's 8%, then I will spend more time, look into the process flow, see where are the bottlenecks this time round after all the optimizations, and then introduce new initiatives. And we will repeat this till we reach our target of 5% late delivery. So that is actually the power of process mining, because it makes this discovery process so fast and so automated. And through the visual representation, it actually allows somebody that understands the process to quickly identify where are all the bottlenecks. That is the true value of process mining, the ability to visualize data. All right. I hope that answers your question.
Thanks, Dave. Yes, I got it. So, Dave, right? So, is there any data limit for uploading? So, I can see, right? The C data is there. Okay. Again, via Excel, CSV, we can upload the some data, right? But Excel, right? We cannot upload 2 GB of data via Excel, because Excel doesn't open yet, right? If it's at more than data, right? So, how this C data, and there is one more option I I have seen on the screen, right? So, how that can be used, or what is the data limit, right, for that?
So you're right to say that we are not just focusing on the limit of CSV, right? But you actually brought up a very important and critical question, right? How far back should we import the data? Now, you quoted the example of 2 GB of data, probably because we are looking at transaction data maybe 10 years back. Now, from a process optimization perspective, the question we need to ask ourselves is, how far back do we want to analyze the data? And most of the time, in terms of the horizon, usually we are looking at maximum 2 years, 3 years of data, because anything more than that will be insignificant. So what could have happened is that 3 years back or 4 years back, perhaps the processes were not so structured. But now things have changed. If we try to emphasize too much on the legacy data, it may actually cloud our insights and cloud our judgment. So therefore, for most of my clients, while theoretically we can actually import a lot of data, but usually I would advise the clients to put a boundary in terms of the dates. So in that way, it actually, so far I have not encountered situations where I need to upload more data than actually what is supported by the platform.
Dave. But right, so is there actually any kind of data limitation, like the 5 GB, 10 GB for C data, or any other thing, right? Maximum kind of, is there data limitation, or how much max data we can upload? Okay. So is there any thought on it?
Yeah, to be honest, I need to check and get back to you on that, because personally I've not encountered the limit, to be honest.
Okay. But right, but as you say, right, like you are only advising, right, for the last 2 to 3 years of data, right, in order to get out the some of the insightful via on the dashboard or something, the whatever it may be. Yeah, but what if, right, if we are having the clients who are in legacy data of, say, from the last 20 years, okay? Again, that might be scattered across the different patterns, right? Some we can say, right, if it's a 20 years data, right, and if some pattern getting changed after every 5 years of data, right? So in that case, right, if we are only analyzing the 3 years of data, right, we are getting only the one kind of pattern, right? The rest of the patterns is different, right? So in that case, this or the process mining is not useful, right?
Again, the same applies, right? So the argument here is that assuming that I have 20 years of data and nothing has changed. And if nothing has changed, looking at 5 years of data is as significant as looking at 20 years of data. All right. Yeah. I mean, I'm sure there's a physical limit somewhere. All systems has a physical limit. To be honest, I really don't know what is the limit. But again, coming in from a practical standpoint, um, if things have changed drastically over the past 20 years, warranting the need to put in 20 years of data, then my response eventually would be, since things are so dynamic, then why are we looking at things beyond 3 years? Because anything before that, eventually those variations may no longer be significant because things have changed. And likewise, if things are relatively stable, then again, why do I need to look at 5 years or 10 years of data? Given that things are relatively the same, I can just look at the last 5 years. So bear in mind, the end objective of process mining is actually not to finger point. It's actually not meant for me through the root cause analysis to identify, oh, this person actually created a compliance issue way back in time. No, that wasn't the point. The point really is, how can we improve the process? And improving the process doesn't necessarily mean that we need to take in all the data. All right. Again, that's my personal opinion. But I agree there may be certain cases where there's a value in bringing in massive amount of data or even data across multiple systems. So therefore, the so-called data limit will be important. So that part I would need to check and see what actually is the physical limit. But purely based on the physical data limit, I would not discount the value of which process mining can actually bring value to the organizations.
Yeah, thanks to thanks, Nisarg.
Just as this is a recorded session, right? If I don't see any more questions yet, so I have a question for you, Dave. Since Simplifinex works with a lot of government agencies, right? And the question is relevant to public sector. So in public sector, how secure it is to use process mining, since it's it's on cloud that we can see right now? Can we use this on-prem? So have you used it with automation suite or on-prem setup? If yes, then how secure it is? And also, can we use Gen AI features or the new features of process mining with that?
To be honest, I have not done on-premise implementation of process mining. So if you were to ask me, the closest I would say is perhaps we can extend the existing Vital automation suite to provide the functionalities of process mining. But Vital automation suite being closed on the intranet specifically, therefore, some of the AI-driven activities like the flashlight thing that I showed earlier probably will not work. Yeah.
Oh, got it.
So, Dave, one more question. I think this is my last question. I might be asking certain question, right, repeatedly.
No
Yeah.
problem.
So as of now, right, you are being on the implementation side of, right. So have you received, right, some kind of a response from the client or in the weekend in the past, right, that like the process mine doesn't help out, right, as the way it is, okay, and like the in order to getting out of the benefit out of it, we are not generating that kind of benefit out of it. Have you got such kind of feedback or something like that?
So I guess, yes, to be honest, I have received that comment before. And when I try to understand and quantify the problem statement, the issue I identified was whoever that was trying to make use of the information provided by process mining, they actually do not. There are two categories. One is that they do not really understand the process. So this is actually an IT person looking at the dashboards and trying to gain some insights into the process. So that's the first camp. And the second camp are people that really do not understand the features of process mining and how you can make use of the root cause analysis, the global filter to help you dice and slice the data. So they're not used to the interface. And for both groups of people, essentially my point here is UiPath Process Mining essentially is a powerful product. All right. It attempts to try to make the interface as intuitive as possible, but it does not take away the need for us to get familiarized with the interface, to understand how the flow eventually works, and more importantly, to understand the processes behind process mining. And it's not by coincidence that I used P2P as my demonstration process, because this is by far the process that I'm most familiar with regards to process mining. So for example, if Nisak said, oh, you can't use P2P, you have to use OTC, for example, order to cash, then perhaps I would stumble along the way, and I would not be able to demonstrate the true value of process mining because I lack the domain knowledge on the OTC, order to cash process. Yeah, so I hope that answers your question.
Yes, yes, yes. Yeah, yes. Thanks, David.
You're welcome.
Okay, we are already 10 minutes past our time. If no more questions, I think we can close on the session. So thank you so much, Dave, for joining. Thank you so much for your awesome insights about process mining. And this recording will help a lot of people who will go through this community page again. Hope to see you again in future sessions of our Bangkok chapter and also in Singapore chapters. Thank you so much, Dave, again. And thank you so much, everyone, for joining in. Happy automation.
Thank you, Nisak.
Yeah,
Thank you,
thanks.
Rohit.
Bye.
And thanks everyone for joining.
I think Dave, you're host, so you can stop recording and maybe close the session for all.
Sure.
I just in between left, so I'm no more host.
How do I stop the recording?
You would stop sharing and then you would see a stop recording option.